"You sure this is your side of town, sweetheart?" The words cut through the golden quiet of Westlake Community Park like a rusty blade across silk. Alana Brooks sat still beneath the wide oak tree, the same bench where folks read magazines, drank oat milk lattes, and whispered about rising taxes. Except today, the bench had her on it. A 17-year-old black girl wearing her J&M Electric Apprentice shirt, dark navy work pants, and boots with a rip in the toe from last week's ladder job. She wasn't bothering anyone. She was just waiting for her little brother Eli to finish soccer practice like she promised Mama she would. And yet, here they came. 3 of them, bikers, loud Harleys that shouldn't be in parks where toddlers chased bubbles and retirees fed ducks. But nobody stopped them. Their engines died one by one, and the tension rolled in like humidity before a storm. The biggest of the 3, a broad-shouldered man with a white beard and worn Army vet shirt, climbed off his bike like he owned the earth beneath it. Wayne Big W. Carter. Behind him were Troy Lean, twitchy all elbows, and Boomer barrel-shaped with a voice made for shouting at waitresses. They didn't walk like strangers, they walked like locals. Men who believed parks like Westlake were meant for a certain kind of peace, a peace that came with property lines, familiar faces, and unspoken rules. Rules that girls like Alana weren't supposed to break. Where are you watching from? Have you ever faced a moment when your dignity was questioned because of who you are or where you come from? Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves respect. Subscribe for more real stories that matter, and share your story in the comments because together our voices break down walls. "She weighed in on a ride back to the projects," Troy muttered just loud enough. Boomer scoffed. "Nah, she thinks that name tag means something." Alana turned a page, calmly, but her ears burned. Her hand rested on her thigh, not clenched, not tense, but aware. Wayne walked toward her slow and heavy like every step was a statement. She looked up, met his eyes, held them. "You work in that thing or is it costume day?" he sneered. "I just finished my shift," she said, voice level. "Waiting for my brother. He plays over there." She nodded toward the soccer field. "Field that belongs to the city. Like this bench. Like this air." Wayne's smirk stiffened. Troy flanked to the right. Boomer leaned on his bike, watching like it was a sport. "You talk real pretty for someone who looks like she don't belong here," Wayne said. "Maybe you should smile more, or leave." Alana didn't move. She closed her book gently. "My family's paid into this zip code since '59, she said. "My grandfather helped wire the lights on that tennis court. I belong here more than your cigarette smoke does." Troy laughed too loud, too sharp. "Somebody's teaching her to talk back. College, huh? Thought y'all cleaned dorms, not lived in them." Boomer chuckled. "She's got a mouth on her. Dangerous combo, smart and black." The air changed then. A woman in yoga pants across the lawn paused mid-walk. She saw the scene. 3 men circling a teenage girl like buzzards, and she turned away, walked faster. That was the moment, the one that always came, when the crowd looks the other way, when silence gives permission. Wayne leaned down just enough for his shadow to cover Alana's knees. "You know," he said low, "this park has a reputation. Safe, clean, quiet. Don't go bringing noise where folks came to breathe easy." Alana looked at him long and slow. "You mean white?" she said. "That's the word you're choking on." For a second, nobody spoke. The birds stopped singing. Even Boomer blinked. And in that stillness, Eli's voice echoed from the field. "Alana." "I'm done," he waved. Innocent, smiling. 10 years old and unaware that danger wasn't always a gun, it was 3 men who didn't like a girl who knew her place and refused to stay in it. Troy turned toward Eli. "That your brother?" he asked, fake sweet. "Maybe we should chat with him too. Teach him early." That was it. Alana rose slowly, boots firm, spine taller than Wayne's ego. Her eyes were still, her face calm. Her hand brushed the worn hem of her work shirt. "Don't touch him," she said. Or, "So help me God," but she didn't finish the sentence. Because girls like Alana didn't need to threaten. They warned. And when they stood up, the world started paying attention. So let me ask you, what would you have done if it were your granddaughter on that bench, if 3 strangers thought her presence was a problem, if your blood boiled because dignity shouldn't be debated, and yet here we are, because what happens next isn't the fight they expected, and it sure as hell ain't the ending they deserve. The moment Alana rose from the bench, the atmosphere shifted like the first crack of thunder on a calm afternoon. Wayne Carter's broad smile thinned to a hard line. Troy's posture stiffened. Boomer's eyes narrowed beneath his heavy brow. The trio formed a tightening circle, their presence a silent declaration that this part of the park was theirs, and that Alana's mere presence was an affront. Golden afternoon light spilled over the manicured lawn, but shadows gathered beneath the old oak. Parents packed up chairs. Kids ran toward their parents' cars. Yet here, by that worn bench, tension rooted itself like an unwelcome weed. Alana's calm, measured breath was the only quiet in the growing storm. Wayne stepped forward, boots crunching against the dry grass. His voice carried low, roughened by years and prejudice. "You got a mouth bigger than you're worth, girl. Think you belong here?" His words weren't just about race, they carried the weight of class, the invisible walls built in towns like Charleston, where black families had long fought for a place at the table. Alana met his gaze without flinching. "I belong wherever I choose," she said, voice steady but full of quiet fire. "My family has roots in this city longer than you've owned that motorcycle." The mention of heritage was a subtle jab, but Wayne caught it and scowled. Troy circled closer. "You work in that uniform like you belong. That shirt don't make you anything but a tenant in a neighborhood you don't own." Boomer cracked his knuckles, his grin cruel. "You're all talk, but you'll learn fast people like us don't welcome folks like you here." Behind Alana, Eli's voice broke through light and trusting. "Alana, I'm done." The sound was a lifeline, but also a magnet for trouble. Wayne's eyes flicked to the boy and his smile twisted. "That's your brother Bet. He's going to need a lesson on respect. Same as you." Alana's stance tightened, but her face stayed calm, resolute. She turned her gaze to Eli. "Stay by the fence," she whispered, protective yet unshaken. Wayne's lips curled in contempt. "You're bold. Real bold. But bold don't save you here." His words weren't just threats. They were a claim, a reminder that in this park, in this town, boldness was a luxury few black girls could afford. The woman walking her golden retriever across the field stopped. She saw the standoff, the tightening noose of hostility. But instead of stepping in, she pulled her cardigan tighter and hurried on. Even the park ranger lingered momentarily by his booth before retreating inside. Silence had sanctioned the scene. A faint click echoed a phone camera turning on. Troy snapped his head toward the sound, shouting for it to stop, but the lens was already fixed. The unseen eyes watching would carry the moment far beyond the oak tree's shade. Alana's voice was soft but sharp. "This park belongs to the people who live here. That means me. That means Eli. That means all of us." She straightened the calm in her shaking hands, becoming a promise. "We don't need permission to exist." Boomer's sneer faltered as he looked around at the gathering crowd, neighbors who whispered but said nothing, who filmed but did not intervene. For a moment, the power of presence outshone the power of fists. The sun dipped lower, the shadows grew longer, and the quiet strength of a girl who refused to shrink made the air itself seem heavier, waiting for the moment when the real reckoning would begin. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows through the sprawling branches of the oak tree where Alana stood. The air hung thick with tension, heavier than the humid Charleston afternoon. Wayne Carter, his broad frame now tense and wary, took a step forward. His leather vest creaked as he shifted his weight, eyes narrowing with the kind of rage born from years of unchallenged dominance. Behind him, Troy and Boomer closed ranks, their faces twisted with a mix of surprise and growing unease. They had expected an easy target, a girl who looked too small, too soft to stand her ground. But Alana was anything but that. "You got some nerve," Wayne growled, his voice low and threatening, yet betraying a flicker of caution. You think you can just sit here, talk back, and expect to walk away unscathed?" His hand jerked forward, aiming for her shoulder in a shove that was more a warning than an attack. Alana moved before the contact could land. Years of karate training unfolded in a seamless, practiced motion. She twisted her body, the soft sound of her boots brushing the grass barely audible. Her palm struck Wayne's wrist, applying pressure that forced him to release and stumble slightly to the side. A sharp intake of breath escaped from him. Surprise mingled with the sting of pain. "You should have just walked away," she said, calm but steady, her eyes locking onto his with unyielding resolve. "This isn't about proving anything. It's about respect." The crowd, watching from a distance, shifted, murmurs rising. Some pulled out phones, others paused in their paths, unable to look away. Troy lunged next, a wild punch aimed at her face, but Alana ducked her body, moving fluidly like a spring released. Her foot shot out a precise kick to his knee that sent him crashing to the ground with a cry of pain. Boomer hesitated, stunned by the sudden reversal. Before he could react, Alana spun her leg, connecting sharply with his ribs. He doubled over, gasping for breath, clutching his side. Wayne, recovering, charged with the fury of a cornered man. His fists swung wildly, desperate and uncontrolled. Alana didn't meet brute force with brute force. She danced on the balls of her feet, dodging with grace and agility born from years of disciplined training. Each punch she evaded, each strike she countered was measured, deliberate, a silent message that strength was not the loudest noise in the room. The small crowd had grown drawn in by the spectacle and the courage of the girl who refused to yield. Parents held their children close, some whispering prayers, others shaking their heads in disbelief. One elderly man, his hands trembling, recorded every moment, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Wayne, red-faced and panting, grabbed at Alana's shirt, trying to wrest control, but she twisted free, delivering a swift strike to his solar plexus that knocked the wind out of him. He staggered back, clutching his chest, his tough exterior cracking under the calm dominance she wielded. Enough, Alana's voice rang out firm and clear, cutting through the rising tension. Her stance remained strong, but her expression held no malice, only resolve. "I don't want to hurt you. Walk away now." For a heartbeat, silence fell. The bikers, battered and bruised, exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Slowly, Wayne waved a hand, signaling his men to retreat. They limped toward their motorcycles, muttering curses under their breaths, engines sputtering to life. Just as they turned to leave, Wayne cast a venomous glance over his shoulder. "This ain't over, girl," he spat the words heavy with threat. Alana didn't respond. She stood her ground as the roar of their engines faded into the distance. Around her, the crowd began to applaud softly, murmurs of admiration rippling through the gathered neighbors. Eli ran to her side, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice trembling. She knelt down, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I'm fine," she said, offering a small, tired smile. "Let's go home." As they walked away, the weight of what had just happened settled over them. The streetlights flickered on, casting pools of light on the cracked sidewalks. Eli glanced up at his sister, eyes searching. "How did you do all that? They were huge." Alana smiled softly, shaking her head. "It's not about being bigger," she said gently. "It's about being ready, staying calm, knowing when to act." Eli frowned. "But what if they come back?" She stopped, turning to face him, her expression serious. "If they do, we'll be ready. But remember, this fighting isn't about proving you're strong. It's about standing up for what's right. And sometimes that means walking away only to come back stronger." They continued down the quiet street, the night wrapping around them like a promise. Somewhere deep inside, Alana knew this was only the beginning. The world wasn't fair. It never had been. But moments like this, moments where courage met discipline, were the threads that held hope together. And for Alana Brooks, hope was never a quiet thing. The evening air hung heavy as Alana and Eli made their way toward the modest porch of their home. The quiet hum of the neighborhood, a stark contrast to the storm that had just passed beneath the oak tree. Streetlights flickered on one by one, casting pools of amber that stretched long shadows across cracked sidewalks and weathered lawns. The scent of magnolia blossoms mingled with the distant rumble of traffic, grounding them in a world that seemed for a moment at peace. But inside Alana's chest, a fierce fire still burned, a mix of triumph, fear, and the raw weight of what had transpired. The porch light illuminated a familiar figure silhouetted against the warm glow spilling from the kitchen window. Mrs. Gloria Brooks, a woman whose strength was etched deep in every line of her face, stood with arms crossed, watching silently as her children approached. Her eyes held the fatigue of years battling against a world that often refused to see her family as equals. Yet, beneath that weariness, there was a fierce pride waiting to be sparked. Alana hesitated for a heartbeat before stepping forward. "Mama," she said softly, voice steady but thick with everything left unspoken. "We're home." Mrs. Brooks didn't immediately respond, instead holding Alana's gaze as if searching for the words before finally breaking into a slow, deliberate nod. "You took your time," she said quietly, her voice laced with worry and something deeper understanding. Eli shuffled beside his sister, glancing nervously between the two. "Mom, what happened? Are you okay?" His youthful innocence hung in the air like a fragile plea for reassurance. Gloria's eyes softened, but the lines around her mouth tightened. "Tell me everything," she said, leading them inside where the walls held the stories of generations past. Stories of struggle, perseverance, and unyielding hope. As Alana recounted the afternoon, the jeers, the stares, the mounting threats, Gloria listened without interruption. Her hands trembled slightly, fingers clutching the edge of the kitchen table as if anchoring herself. When Alana finished, there was a long silence, thick with the weight of shared history and pain. Then Gloria spoke, her voice a mixture of pride and caution. "You did what we taught you. You stood tall, but promise me this, you only fight when there's no other way. There are battles you win with your heart, and those you fight with your fists." Alana nodded, the truth of her mother's words settling deep within her. "I understand, Mama. I promise." Later that night, as the house settled into quiet and the world outside faded into darkness, Alana lay awake. The images replayed in her mind, the faces, the threats, the unexpected surge of power she'd felt in standing up for herself and Eli. But beneath the adrenaline was a stark reality. This was just the beginning. The quiet menace of prejudice and division that lingered in the shadows of their town was far from vanquished. She thought of the women and men who had come before her who fought battles that weren't theirs by choice but by necessity. She thought of the legacy they carried, a legacy she was now a part of unwillingly but resolutely. And she knew that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the determination to rise despite it. Outside, the neighborhood slept unaware of the small but fierce rebellion that had taken place. But in the hearts of the family bound by love and resilience, a quiet revolution was underway, one born from dignity, strength, and an unbreakable will to claim a rightful place in a world still too often defined by lines drawn in shadows. The night whispered promises of challenges yet to come, but Alana was ready. Because standing up was no longer a choice. It was her duty, her voice, her story. The morning light spilled unevenly through the cracked blinds of the Brooks' modest living room, casting long slanted shadows across worn furniture and the family photographs lining the mantelpiece. The quiet hum of the neighborhood waking up children playing in yards, cars pulling out of driveways felt distant, almost unreal, compared to the storm that was quietly brewing inside their community. Alana sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped tightly around a chipped coffee mug, eyes heavy but alert. The events of the previous day were no longer just memories. They had become a spark that threatened to ignite more than just whispered conversations behind closed doors. Word traveled fast in their neighborhood, faster than any police report or newspaper headline. By midday, the incident under the oak tree was no longer just a family story. It had become a topic of hushed debates in barbershops, church halls, and the aisles of the local grocery store. Some spoke with admiration, calling Alana a symbol of courage. Others whispered with scorn, labeling her a troublemaker who dared to defy the natural order. At school, Eli's friends eyed him with a new mixture of respect and caution. Teachers exchanged knowing glances, some offering silent support, others choosing to look away. The pressure built like an unseen weight pressing down on the young siblings. Alana knew that standing up yesterday was only the beginning. The real fight was just starting. That afternoon, as she returned from her apprenticeship, the neighborhood seemed charged. The familiar sidewalks suddenly felt narrower, eyes heavier. Passing neighbors either avoided her gaze or gave her sideways looks that spoke volumes. A group of older men sat on a porch nearby, speaking low but with venom. "That girl's got some fight," one muttered. "Problem is, she's poking the hornet's nest where she don't belong." Her mother, Gloria, met her at the door, eyes weary but fierce. "They're talking," she said simply. "Don't let it get to you." Alana met her mother's gaze and saw the pain behind the words. This wasn't just about a scuffle in the park. It was about the long history of struggle, about communities divided by skin color and dollar signs, about whose voice was allowed to be heard and whose was silenced. Later, the family gathered around the small kitchen table. Gloria's hands trembled slightly as she poured tea. "You stood your ground, Alana. That takes strength. But you must remember strength comes with consequences." Her voice cracked just a little. "Some folks won't see your courage. They'll only see the threat." Eli looked up, confusion mingling with concern. "Why won't they like you for standing up?" Gloria sighed. "Because sometimes standing up means breaking the rules written long before you were born. Rules that some people benefit from by keeping others in their place." Alana's fingers tightened around her cup. "Then we have to change the rules." The room fell silent, each person weighing the truth of that simple declaration. Outside, the sun dipped behind the oak tree where the confrontation had unfolded just days before. The park was quieter now, children's laughter a soft backdrop to the heavy silence that still lingered in some corners of the neighborhood. Yet, the story of Alana's defiance was spreading not just as a tale of a fight won, but as a challenge to the status quo. At school, the next day, whispers followed her halls. Some students nodded in respect. Others stared with suspicion. Teachers exchanged glances. One even pulled her aside. "You showed courage," she said quietly, "but be careful. Not everyone wants to see things change." Alana nodded, understanding that bravery was not a shield from prejudice. It was a beacon that sometimes drew fire. That evening, as she helped Eli with his homework, the phone rang. Gloria answered, listening intently. When she hung up, her face was pale but determined. That was the community center. "They want you to come speak at the next town meeting." Alana's heart quickened. A chance to be heard, to stand not just for herself, but for everyone who had felt silenced. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and resistance. But as she looked at Eli studying his hopeful eyes, she knew that silence was no longer an option. The fight was bigger than one girl, one family, one park. It was about reclaiming dignity, about breaking cycles, about forging a future where everyone had a place no matter the color of their skin or the weight of their wallet. And Alana Brooks was ready to lead that fight. The evening was heavy with anticipation as the old town hall of Charleston filled slowly, its worn wooden benches creaking under the weight of neighbors gathering for the community meeting. Flickering fluorescent lights cast a pale glow on the peeling paint and faded photographs lining the walls, reminders of a town steeped in history, both proud and painful. Families clustered in small groups, whispered conversations weaving through the air, a mix of curiosity and unease palpable among the crowd. Alana Brooks sat near the front, her posture steady but her heart racing. Next to her, Gloria held her hand, a silent anchor amid the swelling storm. Eli, wide-eyed and clutching his sister's jacket, sat quietly on a chair beside them. The air was thick with tension, but also with the unspoken hope that this night might mark something more than just another routine meeting. The mayor called the session to order, his voice echoing through the small room. "We're here to discuss the recent events in Westlake Park," he began, eyes sweeping over the audience. "There's been a lot of talk, and it's important we hear from everyone." First, a few voices rose, concerned neighbors fearful of unrest. others defending tradition, the status quo. Some lamented the changing times, their words heavy with resistance to progress. Then came the whispers, and finally the moment everyone had been waiting for. Alana stood stepping forward with a quiet confidence that silenced the room. Her voice, clear and unwavering, carried across the space. "My family has lived here for generations," she began. "We've built homes, worked hard, and raised children who love this community. But yesterday, I was reminded that, to some, I don't belong here not because of what I've done, but because of the color of my skin and the clothes I wear." She paused, scanning the faces before her, some skeptical, some sympathetic. "When I was at the park, I was called names, stared at like a stranger in my own neighborhood. My little brother was threatened simply for standing by my side. This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been made to feel less unwelcome, invisible." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Gloria squeezed her hand, pride shining in her eyes. Alana continued. "We cannot pretend these things don't happen. We cannot stay silent while fear and division grow in the spaces where our children should feel safe." A man in the back, arms crossed, muttered, "Sounds like trouble to me." Alana's gaze met his steadily. Trouble is when we ignore the truth. Trouble is when some voices drown out others. Trouble is when history repeats because we refuse to listen. Tensions rose as others spoke, some defending the bikers' right to be heard, others calling for calm and unity. But beneath it all was a current of frustration, a yearning for change that could no longer be contained. As the meeting wore on, Alana shared her vision not just of confrontation but of community. She spoke of mentorship programs for youth neighborhood watch groups that included all voices and spaces where everyone's story could be heard. Her words were a balm and a call to action, resonating deeply with many, stirring discomfort in others. When the floor opened to questions, a woman stood. "How do we move forward without more conflict?" she asked. Alana replied, "By acknowledging the past, owning our shared responsibility, and choosing courage over complacency." As the night drew to a close, the mayor thanked everyone for their honesty. Outside, the cool night air was thick with possibility. Neighbors lingered, some exchanging nods of newfound understanding, others retreating to their familiar circles, uncertain of what had just begun. Alana looked up at the star-filled sky, feeling the weight of the moment. She knew the road ahead would be long and fraught, but tonight was proof change starts when one voice refuses to be silenced, and hers was just getting louder. The days following the town meeting unfolded like a slow-burning ember, flickering with moments of hope and shadows of resistance. Charleston's Westlake neighborhood, once a quiet backdrop to everyday lives, now hummed with whispered conversations, cautious glances, and a newfound awareness that change was stirring beneath its surface. Alana Brooks woke each morning with the weight of expectation pressing gently on her shoulders. The courage she had shown at the park, the words she had spoken in the town hall, they were not the end of a story, but the opening lines of a long, uncertain chapter. She moved through her days carrying the quiet determination of someone who had tasted both fear and victory, and knew there was no turning back. One afternoon, as golden light poured through the kitchen window, Gloria sat across from Alana, their tea steaming between them. "You've stirred the hornet's nest," Gloria said softly, her eyes both proud and wary. "But sometimes that's what it takes to wake the neighborhood." Alana smiled, her gaze steady. "I don't want to be a troublemaker, Mama. I just want us to be seen, to be heard." Her mother reached across the table, taking her hand. "And you will be. But remember, change isn't just about loud voices or bold acts. It's about patience, persistence, and knowing when to listen." That evening, Eli bounded into the room, clutching a letter from his school principal, inviting Alana to join a new youth council aimed at fostering community unity. The small victories began to stack little bridges built across divides that once seemed impassable. Yet not all welcomed these shifts. Wayne Carter's group remained a silent undercurrent, their grudging respect mingling with simmering resentment. Neighbors who once ignored Alana's family now watched with wary eyes, some stepping back into old prejudices, others reconsidering the walls they had helped build. One afternoon, Alana found herself walking past the park again, the familiar oak tree, standing tall against a clear blue sky. Children played nearby, laughter spilling over the fence. A woman approached a neighbor she hadn't spoken to before. "You know," the woman said, her voice gentle, "my granddaughter watches how you carry yourself. She says she wants to be like you." Alana paused, a warmth spreading through her chest. "Tell her," she replied, "that standing tall isn't about being the loudest or the strongest. It's about being true to yourself, even when it's hard." As the seasons turned, the Brooks family's story became woven into the fabric of Westlake's evolving identity. The park saw more families of every color, neighbors who once stood divided, now sharing potlucks and stories. Change, slow and imperfect, was taking root. In quiet moments, Gloria would remind Alana of the lessons passed down through generations, that dignity is a shield, courage, a spark, and community the light that guides through the darkest nights. And for those who had witnessed Alana's journey from the tense confrontation beneath the oak tree to the respectful nods at the town hall, the lesson was clear and profound. True strength is not in fighting to overpower others, but in standing firm with integrity and grace. Not in insisting on division, but in building bridges. And not in silence, but in the courage to speak one's truth even when the world is listening for silence. Because in the end, it is not the battles we win that define us, but the barriers we break and the hope we kindle for those who come after.